The grand halls of the Galactic Council gleamed under the light of 3 artificial suns, their radiance creating an almost surreal glow across the vast chamber. The air was thick with tension, as thousands of alien representatives filled the curved rows that reached up to the towering ceiling. Their alien forms, ranging from insectoid to crystalline, looked down at the center of the chamber where Earth's ambassador, James Wilson, stood alone. His gray suit seemed stark against the shimmering alien robes surrounding him, but he stood firm, his eyes scanning the room, prepared for what was about to unfold. He had spent the last 3 months tirelessly fighting against this moment, seeking a peaceful resolution, but all the signs now pointed to failure. The cold, calculating stares from the alien delegates only intensified his dread. At the center of the chamber, High Counselor Smith, a tall and imposing blue-skinned being with 4 arms, raised his upper right hand. The motion was enough to silence the room. His translator activated, amplifying his voice, which echoed through the vast chamber like a booming thunderclap. The Council has reached its decision regarding the human problem, he announced, his words laced with finality. Wilson's heart sank as he braced for the impact of the Council's verdict. This wasn't a trial, it was an execution. The humans, along with their colonies, have been deemed too dangerous for continued participation in galactic affairs, Smith continued. His words struck Wilson like a physical blow, and he fought to maintain his composure. Their aggressive expansion, unpredictable behavior, and military development have forced our hand. Wilson stepped forward, his voice steady despite the rising tide of anger. You can't do this. We have followed every rule, signed every treaty, and adhered to every agreement, he pleaded. His words seemed to carry no weight as Smith's cold, impassive stare met him. The Council had made up its mind. There was no room for reason. Silence, Smith's voice boomed, cutting Wilson off. Your very reaction proves our point. Humans always resort to emotional outbursts when cornered. The chamber's massive screens lit up, displaying carefully selected images intended to paint humanity as a threat. Images flashed by showing human mining operations expanding faster than permitted, colonial ships moving into disputed territories, and the rapid growth of Earth's military fleet. Each image was curated to highlight humanity's so-called recklessness, ignoring the complexities and context behind each situation. As of this moment, Smith continued, his voice rising with authority, Earth and its solar system will be placed under quarantine. Energy barriers will be erected at all major travel points. All human ships outside their home system will be detained. All human colonies on foreign worlds will be gathered and contained until they can be safely returned to Earth. Wilson's blood ran cold as the images on the screen shifted, showing the rapid formation of massive energy barriers around the edges of the solar system, sealing off humanity's home. His eyes widened in horror as the votes appeared on the main screen, confirming the decision. The vote was nearly unanimous, with only 3 out of 50 species voting against the quarantine. The rest of the Council looked at him with a mixture of fear and satisfaction. The message was clear. Humanity was to be locked away, isolated from the rest of the galaxy. This is a mistake, Wilson said, his voice unwavering despite the surge of frustration building inside him. You're not containing a threat, you're creating one. As he spoke, a guard stepped forward, attempting to escort him out. Wilson shrugged off the alien's grip, unwilling to leave without making his final statement. Humanity survived on a death world, he said, his voice now louder, more forceful. We evolved fighting predators that would make your strongest warriors run in fear. We unified our planet after thousands of years of war, not through outside intervention like many of you. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And now you think a barrier will hold us? Smith waved his lower hands dismissively, signaling the guards to remove Wilson from the chamber. But the damage had been done. As Wilson was led away, he knew the Council had underestimated humanity's resilience and ingenuity. Across human space, the Council's decision triggered immediate action. Massive alien ships appeared at the edges of the solar system, deploying the energy barriers that would seal off Earth's home. 27 colony worlds, each a symbol of humanity's drive to explore and expand, found themselves encircled by these impenetrable walls. Council peacekeepers moved in with stunning efficiency, rounding up millions of human colonists and holding them in hastily constructed detention centers. Back on Earth, the news hit like a tidal wave. Emergency meetings were convened in every major government building. Military commanders scrambled to account for their scattered forces, desperately trying to coordinate with the few ships still within the solar system. Families waited anxiously for any word about relatives trapped on foreign worlds. In the White House Situation Room, military and civilian leaders gathered around a holographic display showing the growing energy barriers surrounding their solar system. The barriers were tightening, drawing an invisible noose around Earth's future. General Roberts, his face red with anger, pointed at the holographic display, which now showed the perimeter of the barrier. "They planned this," he growled, his voice thick with fury. "They waited until most of our deep space fleet was beyond the solar system, conducting trade runs, leaving us vulnerable. Nearly 60% of our ships are trapped out there." President Laura Thompson stood silently before the display, watching as the last portions of the barrier were deployed. The room fell into a tense silence as all eyes turned to her. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but it carried a cold, calculating edge that none of them had ever heard before. "They think they know us," she said, her gaze unwavering. "They think they've studied humanity enough to predict our response." She turned to face the room fully, her eyes burning with determination. "But they've forgotten the most important lesson about humans. We are our most dangerous when we're cornered." Thompson pressed a button on the console, and a new image appeared on the display. It showed a classified research facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. "Initiate Project Darkstar," she ordered, her tone unyielding. "Contact every underground lab, every hidden research station. As of this moment, we are at war, but we'll do this our way." The room hummed with new energy as orders were dispatched in secret. Across the globe, lights flickered on in bunkers and hidden laboratories, as scientists and engineers who had been working on top-secret projects for years now received the green light to move forward. The Galactic Council had thought they had contained humanity. They believed that the barriers would hold, keeping Earth in check while they dealt with the human problem at their leisure. But they were wrong. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for years. This wasn't the end of their story in the stars. It was just the beginning. Admiral Mary Davis walked through the rows of new ships, her eyes scanning the sleek vessels that stood like shadows in the dimly lit hangar. These weren't the bulky, overt ships the Galactic Council had been monitoring for years. No, these were different, sleek, dark, and completely invisible to the standard detection methods used by the Council. The hulls of the ships absorbed the light around them, making them blend seamlessly with their surroundings. They were far more advanced than anything the Council had seen from humanity, and that was exactly the point. "How many are ready?" Davis asked, turning to the chief engineer, a seasoned man named Jack Brown. His graying hair was flecked with white, and his hands were rough from years of labor. He looked up from the nearest vessel, his expression prideful but focused. 50 ships in this batch alone," Brown replied, running his hand along the smooth hull. "The dark matter drives are functioning perfectly. The Council's sensors can't detect them. They're looking for standard engine signatures, but this?" He knocked on the hull, producing a soft, echoing sound. "This is something they've never seen before." Davis nodded, her mind already calculating the next steps. "And the rest?" "We'll be ready when the time comes," Brown assured her. "We're building faster than they can react." Elsewhere on Earth, similar scenes played out. In underground bases across the planet, humanity was working together like never before. The quarantine that had been imposed by the Galactic Council had forced old enemies to become allies. Countries that had been at odds for centuries now pooled their resources, sharing knowledge and technology, all with a single goal in mind: prepare for the war that was inevitably coming. At the Geneva complex, Dr. Thomas Reed led a team of quantum physicists in their most crucial experiment yet. 4 months they had been studying the Council's barrier technology, specifically, its fundamental flaw. The aliens had assumed that by operating on certain standard quantum frequencies, they could lock humanity within a confined space. But they hadn't considered one thing: humanity's capacity for thinking outside the box. "The barrier works on standard quantum frequencies," Reed explained to the military officers gathered around, his voice calm but filled with the excitement of discovery. "But what if we could operate completely outside those frequencies?" Reed pressed a button and a small drone zipped across the room. It passed through the test barrier without so much as a ripple, reappearing on the other side completely unaffected. The officers' eyes widened in disbelief, and grins spread across their faces. "This is it," one officer muttered. "We found the way through." "Yes," Reed confirmed, his excitement barely contained. "If we can operate outside their detection range, we can pass through their barriers without them ever noticing." This was the breakthrough humanity needed. It wasn't just about breaking free from the Council's quarantine. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. Meanwhile, the greatest deception played out in plain sight. Across the galaxy, thousands of human colonists remained imprisoned in the Council's detention centers. The aliens had assumed that these colonists were broken, resigned to their fate, and in many cases they were right. But the council guards had grown complacent, believing that they had subdued their prisoners. They didn't realize that every day these so-called broken humans were silently working against them. Through seemingly innocent activities like playing card games or exchanging casual remarks, the colonists passed hidden messages to each other. What the council thought were frustrated outbursts from defeated prisoners were actually meticulously coded reports on guard rotations and security weaknesses. Each detention center had become a hub for intelligence gathering. The council had underestimated humanity's resourcefulness, and that would prove to be their undoing. Back on Earth, in the old United Nations building in New York, now serving as the Human Defense Command, President Laura Thompson sat with her war council. The room was completely sealed against any potential surveillance, protected by the latest in quantum encryption and stealth technologies. This was the heart of humanity's final response to the Galactic Council's aggression. They think we've spent these years accepting our fate, President Thompson said, her voice cold and determined. She stood before a holographic display that showed the positions of their hidden fleet. They think they've contained us. They see what they want to see, a species learning its lesson. But they've forgotten one thing: humanity is most dangerous when we're cornered. Admiral Davis's hologram flickered into view from Mars, where the fleet had been quietly assembling. From Mars, our ships are ready, she reported. The crews have trained in complete radio silence. We can deploy through the barrier at 20 different points simultaneously. We'll strike when they least expect it. Thompson turned her gaze to General Roberts, who was seated nearby. And the colonists? She asked. They're in position, Roberts replied. Every detention center has its own resistance cell. They've mapped every weakness, every gap in security. When we move, they'll move with us. Dr. Reed, barely able to contain his excitement, stepped forward. The quantum masking technology has been miniaturized, he said, practically bouncing on his heels. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of equipment we send through the barrier will be invisible to their standard detection methods. We're not just going to break out. We're going to show them a kind of warfare they've never imagined. Thompson stood silent for a moment, her eyes locked onto the faces of the men and women gathered around the table. She knew this wasn't just a military operation, this was humanity's final stand. 3 years ago, the Galactic Council had thought they were teaching humanity a lesson, showing them their place in the universe. But now humanity had spent every moment of those 3 years preparing, learning, and evolving. They expected humanity to be predictable, to be primitive, to accept their fate. But instead, the Council was about to learn what happens when you back a species into a corner and give them time to think. Thompson pressed her hand against the DNA reader at the console, authorizing the final command sequence. Operation Shadowfall begins in 24 hours, she said, her voice steady. Humanity is about to remind the galaxy why you should never cage something more clever than yourself. Across the solar system, hidden shipyards hummed to life. Silent signals passed through quantum channels the Council couldn't detect, and in detention centers scattered across the galaxy, human colonists began their final preparations. The silence was about to end, and the Council was about to learn a hard lesson. When humanity is backed into a corner, they will fight with a cunning that no one can predict. In an underground facility in Antarctica, Dr. Reed stood before a massive testing chamber, watching as his team prepared their latest breakthrough. The chamber contained a simple metal cube, but it was anything but simple. It began to glow with a soft purple light, its energy reading unlike anything the Council's technology could detect. The quantum field was completely invisible to standard sensors. Power level stable, Reed's assistant Mark called out. The quantum field is completely invisible. Even the Council's best equipment would see nothing but empty space. Reed smiled, his mind racing with possibilities. This was humanity's secret weapon. It wasn't just a power source, it was the key to victory. Every ship in their hidden fleet would carry one, making them invisible to the Council's advanced tracking systems. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a different kind of preparation was underway. A training facility stretched for miles beneath the seafloor, hidden from prying eyes. Here, Colonel Lisa Walker watched as soldiers practiced with new weapons and equipment. They moved like shadows, their dark armor absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Each soldier carried weapons designed to operate on the same principles as Reed's cube, completely invisible to the Council's detection methods. The pieces were falling into place. Humanity's time had come. 15 seconds, Colonel Lisa Walker announced, glancing at the timer on her wrist. That's how long it takes to disable a Council security system using our new tech. They won't know what hit them. Her voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation. The soldiers around her nodded, their faces serious, focused. They weren't just military personnel anymore, they had become something more: shadows. Ghosts, prepared to strike without warning, without mercy. The training had been rigorous, grueling, and meticulous over the past 3 years. Every movement, every tactic, every scenario had been perfected. These were not the same soldiers who had once followed orders blindly. They were the best of humanity, using their knowledge, ingenuity, and the harsh lessons of their imprisonment to become something entirely different. They had learned to fight not just with strength but with silence, deception, and stealth. And the Council would soon learn the consequences of underestimating the resilience of humanity. In orbit around Jupiter, hidden deep within the gas giant's swirling, powerful magnetic field, humanity's new fleet continued to grow. The ships were unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever encountered. They were angular, sleek, and designed not to reflect light, but to absorb it. From a distance they would seem like voids in space itself, dark, near invisible, and impossible to detect. The fleet was scattered across the solar system, a fleet of shadows growing stronger every day. Admiral Mary Davis floated in zero gravity within one of the ships, inspecting its design. She was flanked by the ship's designer, a young engineer named Robert Winters, who was bubbling with pride at the success of his latest project. The ship before her was the epitome of human ingenuity, a masterpiece of stealth and precision. "How many crew members can she hold?" Admiral Davis asked, her voice low but commanding. 200, Winters replied, his voice confident but cautious, as if still marveling at what they had created. "But she only needs 5 to operate at full capacity. The AI systems take care of most of the functions. They're completely independent of Council networks, so they can't hack what they can't detect." Davis nodded. The ship was a marvel, one of many in the fleet. Its systems had been designed to operate outside the standard detection ranges, utilizing technologies the Council had never even imagined. The engines didn't push against space the way traditional drives did. They slipped through it, manipulating dark matter and quantum fields in a way that the alien scientists had never conceived. The Council would never see it coming. Back on Earth, in a secret room beneath the White House, President Laura Thompson met with her most trusted advisors. The war room was secured against any possible surveillance, protected by the most advanced technology available. They had spent years preparing for this moment, using every second of the quarantine to their advantage. The walls of the room displayed a real-time map of their hidden assets: ships, weapons, and highly trained personnel scattered across the solar system. The Council's latest report shows no unusual activity, General Roberts reported with a slight grin, his confidence radiating as he leaned over the map, pointing out the positions of decoy ships. "They're watching our fake installations, our decoys. Meanwhile, our real fleet is growing stronger every day." "And the colonists?" President Thompson asked, her voice steady, unwavering. "Ready and waiting," Roberts replied without hesitation. "Each detention center has a complete tactical map. Security patterns, weak points, guard rotations. Our people have memorized every detail while pretending to be broken prisoners. The Council has no idea what's coming." Just then, Dr. Thomas Reed, who had just returned from Antarctica, stepped forward with a sense of urgency. His eyes lit up with excitement. "The final batch of dark tech cores is ready. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of equipment we'll use in the operation is now invisible to the Council's sensors." President Thompson's eyes narrowed. "And what about their barriers?" Reed smiled, a mixture of pride and triumph on his face. "That's the beautiful part. We've discovered that their barrier technology only works on standard quantum frequencies. Our dark tech operates completely outside those frequencies. Their strongest defenses might as well be soap bubbles to our ships." Thompson stared at the holographic map, her gaze traveling across the solar system to where the Council's shimmering barrier encircled their solar system. It seemed so impenetrable, so absolute. But she knew the truth: it was fragile, just like everything else the Council had assumed about humanity. "They think they're so advanced, so far ahead of us," Thompson muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "But they've forgotten something important about humans." Colonel Walker, who had joined the meeting via secure hologram, leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What's that?" Thompson turned to face her, her expression resolute. "We don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to win. And for 3 years they've given us nothing to do but adapt, invent, and prepare. They think they've contained us. But they've created their worst nightmare." The room fell silent as the gravity of what was about to happen sank in. Less than 24 hours remained until Operation Shadowfall would begin. It was the final phase of humanity's long-term plan. The Council thought they had broken humanity, thought they had crushed them into submission. Instead, they had created the most dangerous kind of enemy, a species that had been given time to learn, to evolve, and to prepare. The storm was about to break. At exactly midnight Earth time, the attack began. 50 dark ships, silent, invisible, and lethal, slipped through the Council's barrier as if it were nothing more than a mirage. They moved through space like shadows, their dark tech cores rendering them invisible to every sensor and patrol ship they passed. They were a phantom fleet, undetectable and unstoppable. Operation Shadowfall is underway, Admiral Davis announced over the comms, her voice calm but firm as she stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Shadow of Earth. All ships report ready. The communications officer nodded. The Council's defense networks show no signs of detecting us, Admiral. Good, Davis said, turning toward the tactical map. Strike teams, you are clear to proceed. Target, 50 detention centers. Each of the 50 detention centers that held human colonists was considered to be secure, protected by the most advanced alien technology. But the aliens had no idea that their broken prisoners had been quietly gathering intelligence for years. At Detention Center 17, the night shift guards sat at their posts, their attention dull as they watched monitors displaying nothing more than the usual footage. They didn't notice that the footage had been looping for the last 5 minutes. Then the first sign that something was wrong came. The lights flickered out. At first it seemed like a glitch. But soon the entire facility's power systems went dark. Every light, every screen, every piece of equipment. Dead. The guards rushed for their weapons, but those didn't work either. Panic began to spread, but it was too late. Dark shapes moved through the blackness. The guards couldn't see them, couldn't hear them, couldn't even detect them. The human strike teams, clad in their light-absorbing armor, moved through the facility like ghosts. Colonel Walker's voice crackled through the comms. Control room secured. Phase 2 is in motion. The cell doors opened silently. Human colonists who had spent the last 3 years pretending to be broken, now moved with practiced precision. They had memorized every route, every checkpoint, every detail of the facility. While the aliens had assumed they were simply waiting in despair, they had been learning, preparing, and waiting for this moment. This is what you get for underestimating humanity, Walker muttered to herself as an alien guard stared at her in shock, before her stun weapon incapacitated him. It was the beginning of the end for the Council. The principles that the Council had never imagined were now in full effect. At all 50 detention centers, similar scenes were unfolding simultaneously. The Council's once mighty security systems, their supposedly unbreakable barriers, their advanced sensors, all of them were useless against humanity's newly developed dark tech. For years, the Council had considered their barriers to be the ultimate defense, an impenetrable shield that kept their prisoners in check. But humanity had turned their captivity into the perfect opportunity to develop something far beyond the Council's understanding. In orbit around each facility, the dark ships appeared just long enough to beam up the freed colonists. These ships, utilizing drives that operated outside normal space, could transport thousands of people in mere minutes, slipping through the cracks in the Council's surveillance like ghosts. The colonists, once prisoners, were now free and they were going home. Humanity's carefully planned operation was executing flawlessly. Back at the Council's main monitoring station, alarms finally began to sound. High Counselor Smith was woken from his sleep by panicked calls, his mind still groggy from the disruption. "What do you mean you've lost contact?" he barked, his voice thick with disbelief. "How can 50 detention centers go dark at the same time?" His assistant's voice trembled over the communication line. "Sir, we're getting reports. The humans, they're all gone." "Gone?" Smith repeated, his mind racing. "What do you mean gone?" "They vanished, sir. Every one of them. We've lost contact with the detention centers. We've checked the barrier around Earth, it's still active, but we're detecting no human life signs in any of the facilities. The humans are gone, along with most of our security staff." Smith's heart skipped a beat as the weight of the situation settled over him. He could hardly process what he was hearing. The most secure facilities, the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever seen, all useless against a race they had long underestimated. They had thought the humans broken, but the truth was far worse. They had never been more dangerous than they were now. On Earth's command center, Admiral Mary Davis stood, watching the report stream in. The operation was going exactly as planned. Each detention center had been secured without a single major issue. The colonists were free and the Council security personnel, Those who had not been taken by surprise had been captured with minimal resistance. "Reports are in," Davis said, her voice steady. "All 50 detention centers secured. 20,000 colonists rescued. 15,000 council security personnel captured. No casualties on our side." A hologram of President Thompson appeared on the bridge, her expression grim but proud. "Excellent, Admiral," she said. "Now begin phase 2. Show them exactly what they're dealing with." Davis nodded, a slight smile creeping onto her face as she turned to her crew. "All ships, execute final orders." With a simple command, each dark ship activated the special package they had left behind at each detention center. This was the final step of their plan. The package wasn't a weapon, it was a message. Suddenly, every screen in every council facility lit up with the same message, broadcast across their secure communication systems. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of war. The message read, "Asterisk to the Galactic Council. You thought you could cage humanity. You thought we would accept your barriers and your rules. Instead, we used the time you gave us to develop technology beyond your understanding. This was just a demonstration. We have taken back our people. Next we take our freedom. You have 24 hours to open negotiations, or we will show you what else we have learned during our imprisonment." High Counselor Smith stood in his private chambers, staring at the message with disbelief. He had seen it repeat over and over on every screen in his room, but each time it hit him harder. This was no simple rebellion, it was something far worse. The Council had thought they were containing a primitive, predictable species. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. They had given humanity time to adapt, to evolve, to learn. And now they were facing the consequences of that miscalculation. In the Galactic Council's emergency chamber, chaos erupted. Representatives from 50 different species crowded the enormous room, shouting, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Their voices were filled with fear, anger, and confusion. High Counselor Smith stood at the center, his blue skin now pale with stress as he tried to bring order to the meeting. "Order!" Smith shouted over the noise, but his voice was lost in the sea of rising panic. "We must have order." But no one listened. The massive screens around the room continued to flash reports of Council defense stations going dark, one after another. Each station vanished from their sensors as if it had never existed, without any trace of a struggle. "What's happening?" someone shouted from the back of the room. "How are they doing this?" One of the representatives from the Orion system, Green, stood up, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The humans were contained. The barrier, our technology, how is this possible?" Another representative shouted in disbelief, "The barrier is useless. It's all useless. We've been played for fools." Smith grabbed a data pad from one of his aides, his hands shaking as he scanned the reports. The defense stations were going dark one by one, but their sensors showed nothing. No ships, no weapons, no energy signatures, just silence. The stations were being erased from existence, wiped out as if they had never been there at all. He couldn't comprehend it. How could this happen? What had the humans done? "They were building," Smith said almost to himself. "But what?" Before he could ask again, the entire room was plunged into darkness. Every screen in the emergency chamber flickered and then turned black. The silence was thick, palpable. For a moment no one moved, no one spoke. And then one by one the screens flickered back to life. The Earth Defense Command logo appeared, followed by the face of Admiral Davis. Her expression was calm, but there was a quiet power in the way she held herself. "Members of the Council," she began, her voice clear and confident, "I hope we have your attention now." Smith tried frantically to cut the transmission, to shut down the broadcast, but nothing worked. Every system seemed to be under human control. The screens wouldn't turn off. "This is impossible," Smith shouted, his voice strained. "Our technology is superior. Our defenses." A voice came from behind him, cold and mocking. "Your technology," it said, "operates on principles that are thousands of years old." Smith spun around to find a human woman in black armor standing there, seemingly having appeared out of thin air. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer a subordinate. She was a force unto herself, and the room fell silent in shock. Colonel Lisa Walker smiled at the stunned council members, her gaze sweeping over them as the gravity of the moment set in. "While you were busy keeping track of our primitive ships and outdated technology," she said, her voice low and steady, "we were building something new. Something you couldn't see. Something you never even knew existed." And just like that, humanity's revenge was complete. The council was no longer in control. Colonel Walker's voice echoed through the council chamber, laced with the calm certainty of a species that had learned, adapted, and now held the upper hand. "You congratulated yourselves on containing us," she said, her tone both sharp and matter-of-fact. "But while you were busy keeping us caged, we were studying how your technology works. Then we simply stepped outside those rules." As if on cue, more humans appeared around the room, their dark tech armor blending into the shadows. The armor seemed to absorb light itself, rendering them almost invisible. They had been there the whole time, watching, waiting, and now they were making their presence known. "This," Walker continued, "the detention center breakout, was just the beginning. We've had 3 years to place our people and our technology throughout Council space. Your entire defense network is now under our control." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in, and then nodded to a screen that flickered to life. Admiral Davis's face appeared, her expression calm but resolute. "You have a choice to make, Council members," Davis said, her voice ringing clear across the room. "You can either open real negotiations with Earth as equals this time, or we can demonstrate just how completely we've compromised your entire civilization." To prove her point, every personal device in the chamber activated at once. Council members' most secret files, their banking records, private messages, and classified documents, appeared on the screens for all to see. It was a clear signal that humanity now had access to everything, that nothing was hidden from them anymore. The Council's once secure walls of secrecy had crumbled. "You didn't just fail to contain us," Walker said, taking a step toward the center of the chamber, her voice ringing with quiet authority. "You gave us the perfect opportunity to infiltrate every level of your society. We are everywhere. We see everything. And we're not the primitive species you thought we were." Smith sank into his chair, his forearms limp at his sides as shock washed over him. The enormity of the situation was too much to process all at once. They had tried to cage a species that had evolved on a death world, one that had survived countless disasters and thrived on competition, adaptability, and ingenuity. Instead of breaking humanity's spirit, they had inadvertently forced humanity to evolve into something far more dangerous. A species that moved like shadows, operating beyond the bounds of normal physics. A species that had learned to turn the Council's arrogance against them. "The choice is yours," Walker said, her form beginning to fade from view as her image blurred and dissipated, the dark tech that cloaked her taking her from sight. "But choose quickly. Earth's patience has run out." The chamber fell silent, a heavy, suffocating silence that was filled with the terrifying knowledge that the Council was no longer in control. The hunters had become the hunted. The game had changed and the Council had just become the prey. The main Council chamber looked very different now. Gone was the usual grandeur, the overwhelming sense of power that had defined the space for centuries. Instead, 50 alien representatives sat quietly, their faces a mix of fear, confusion, and anger, as they watched Earth's delegation walk to the center of the room. The humans were no longer treated as prisoners or inferiors. They were there as equals, and everyone in the room understood that the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. President Thompson led the group, flanked by Admiral Davis and Dr. Reed. No guard stepped forward to block their path. No weapons were aimed at them. After the demonstration yesterday, everyone knew how useless such gestures would be. The Council's defense systems were no longer a deterrent. The humans had rendered them obsolete. High Counselor Smith, his face strained and pale, watched as the Earth delegation moved toward the center of the room. All 4 of his hands were tightly folded together, and his expression was one of resignation and disbelief. The humans had used the normal entrances. No, they hadn't. They had simply appeared in the chamber. Their dark tech armor made a mockery of the Council's best security systems. It was as if they had walked through the walls themselves. "Welcome to the new reality," President Thompson's voice carried across the room, her tone firm and measured. "We're here to discuss the future of galactic relations." High Counselor Smith's voice broke through the tense silence, quiet but resigned. "You mean to deliver your demands," he said, as if speaking from a place of deep understanding. Thompson smiled, the faintest hint of amusement crossing her features. "Let's call it a mutual understanding. Admiral Davis," Thompson continued, gesturing to her colleague, "please show them what we've learned during our containment." With a simple motion, the screens around the room flickered to life once again. This time what appeared on the screen sent a chill through the room. Internal messages, secret files, private communications, decades of Council corruption, were now laid bare for all to see. The Council's secrets were no longer hidden. "We found some interesting things," Admiral Davis said, her voice calm as she moved through the files, displaying them for everyone to see. "Secret deals to keep certain species from advancing. hidden taxes on developing worlds, private agreements to share technology with some species while denying it to others. As the files continued to scroll, the chamber became increasingly uncomfortable, members of the council now acutely aware of the depth of their missteps. Dr. Reed stepped forward, holding what looked like a simple black cube in her hand. "We also found this interesting detail," she said, her voice laced with quiet pride. "The council has been suppressing new technological developments that might threaten their power structure." With a flick of her wrist, Reed activated the cube. Instantly, every piece of council technology in the room shut down: personal devices, translation systems, even the artificial gravity. Everything was dead. "Impressive," one of the council members said sarcastically. "You can turn things off?" Reed smiled, her eyes gleaming with quiet confidence. "No, we can do much more." She pressed another button on the cube and just as quickly, everything powered back on. But this time things were different. The translation systems worked more smoothly than before. The artificial gravity felt more natural, more fluid. Every system had been improved. "This," Dr. Reed said, gesturing to the chamber, "is what happens when you let scientists work without artificial limits. In 3 years we didn't just copy your technology. We completely rebuilt it, made it better, more efficient." President Thompson walked to the center of the room, her voice now carrying the weight of what was to come. "Here are our terms. They are non-negotiable." A hologram flickered to life in front of her, displaying a list of demands. 1. All barriers around Earth and human space will be permanently removed. 2. All restrictions on human technological development will be lifted. 3. Every species in council space will have equal access to technological advancement. 4. A new council will be formed with equal representation for all species. 5. No species will ever be contained again. She raised her hand, signaling for silence, and then continued. "If you agree, we will share our advances with everyone. If you refuse..." Her words trailed off, letting the threat hang in the air, heavy and real. Colonel Walker's voice, now coming from somewhere unseen in the shadows of the chamber, added a final warning. "Remember, we're already inside every major facility in council space. We know every secret, every weakness, every flaw in your systems." High Counselor Smith stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he faced President Thompson. "And if we agree," he asked, his voice wavering, "what guarantee do we have that humans won't simply take control of everything?" "Because that's not who we are," Thompson replied, her voice calm but resolute. "We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to explore it, learn from it, grow with it. But we will never again allow anyone to cage us." Thompson stepped closer to Smith, her gaze unwavering. "You can either accept that reality, or face the consequences." The chamber fell into a heavy silence as High Counselor Smith realized the gravity of the situation. Humanity had outmaneuvered them at every turn, and there was no way out now. They had tried to contain humanity, to hold them in check out of fear for what they might become, but in doing so, they had inadvertently pushed humanity to evolve into something far more powerful than they ever could have imagined. The Council had thought they were securing their power, yet it was now evident that they had unwittingly created their own downfall. "We accept your terms," Smith said, his voice resigned. It was the only choice left, and he knew it. Humanity had already proven its power, and there was no turning back. The old ways of control and subjugation were over. "Good," President Thompson replied, her voice firm with the weight of their victory. "Dr. Reed will begin sharing our technological improvements immediately. Admiral Davis will oversee the removal of the barriers, and Colonel Walker's teams, well, they'll be watching to make sure everyone plays fair." As if to emphasize her point, several human soldiers in dark armor appeared around the chamber, their forms flickering in and out of view, just long enough to remind the Council of humanity's newfound reach. Then they disappeared again like shadows in the night. "Welcome to a new era," Thompson declared, her voice carrying across the room. "One where humanity is no longer your prisoner. We are your wake-up call." Davis's words followed, her tone final. "The galaxy will never be the same." And indeed it wasn't. 1 month after the Council had accepted Earth's terms, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Grand Council chamber, once a place of fear, secrecy, and control, now buzzed with excited conversations. Representatives from every species filled the space, their voices raised in discussion, not of war or defense, but of possibility and cooperation. It was as though a weight had been lifted, and for the first time in centuries, the future seemed open to all. Dr. Reed stood at a teaching station, explaining humanity's dark tech to a group of alien scientists. "The key," he said, his voice measured and clear, isn't to fight against normal physics. It's to step outside it completely. The aliens watched in awe as Reed made objects disappear and reappear with a simple gesture. They were stunned by the ease and elegance with which he manipulated space itself. "You developed all this in just 3 years?" a young alien scientist asked, his eyes wide with amazement. Reed smiled, his pride understated. "Amazing what happens when you remove artificial limits, isn't it?" As he finished speaking, he looked around the group of scientists, his expression playful. "Now, who wants to learn how to build their own quantum core?" The aliens laughed, eager to learn more, their curiosity and wonder palpable. The thought of what was possible now filled the room, and for the first time the galaxy's potential felt limitless. In another part of the chamber, Admiral Davis met with military leaders from various worlds. The old council's restrictions on weapon technology had been lifted, but with an interesting twist. Every species was now required to share openly. "If everyone has the same defensive capabilities," Davis explained, "then no one can bully anyone else. That's the whole point of our new approach." Some of the alien commanders nodded in agreement, understanding the implications of the shift. They had seen firsthand how humanity's superior technology had rendered their best defenses useless. But instead of using this advantage to dominate, humanity was teaching others how to reach the same level. The old ways of fear and dominance were fading, replaced by collaboration and mutual growth. President Thompson walked through the newly established Earth Embassy, which had materialized overnight in the heart of Council space. No one had seen it being built. It had simply appeared, a testament to humanity's continued technological surprises. "How are the new trade agreements working?" she asked her advisor. "Better than expected," he replied. "Once we removed the Council's secret taxes and restrictions, trade between species increased by 300%. Turns out most people want to work together if you let them." Colonel Walker's teams, still operating invisibly through Council space, had a new mission. No longer gathering secrets, they were now helping to protect developing worlds from those who might try to take advantage of the changing times. "We found another group trying to hoard technology," Walker reported to Thompson. "But we didn't even have to intervene. 3 different species worked together to stop them. They're learning." It was a sign that things were changing, that the old patterns of exploitation and manipulation were giving way to cooperation and shared growth. In orbit around Earth, the barrier that had once been erected to contain humanity was gone. In its place, ships from dozens of worlds moved freely, their crews, scientists, traders, explorers, working together and benefiting from humanity's technological advances. High Counselor Smith, now serving as just one voice among many in the new Galactic Assembly, watched as Earth's ambassador James Wilson addressed the chamber. It was the same man they had tried to dismiss 3 years ago, but now everyone listened carefully to his words. "The story of humanity's revenge isn't about punishment," Wilson said, his voice steady and clear. "It's about transformation. When you tried to cage us, we could have used our advances to destroy or dominate. Instead, we chose to lift everyone up." He gestured to the busy chamber around them. "Look around you. In 1 month, we've seen more progress than the old council allowed in a century. Species that were kept primitive now build their own ships. Worlds that were kept poor now trade freely. Knowledge that was kept secret is now shared openly." The chamber erupted in applause. Even Smith, his face weary, found himself nodding in agreement. The humans had done something no one expected. They had turned their revenge into a revolution. They had turned their punishment into progress. In a quiet corner of the chamber, Dr. Reed showed President Thompson his latest project. "We're still keeping some advances in reserve," he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one was listening too closely. "Just in case." Thompson nodded thoughtfully. Humanity learned its lesson. Trust but verify. Share but stay prepared. The dark tech teams were still out there, still invisible, still watching over the galaxy. "Peace works best when everyone knows they can't get away with breaking it," Thompson said, her voice resolute. As the day came to a close, ships from Earth and a dozen other worlds launched together, heading out to explore the unknown regions of space. Their crews were mixed, humans working alongside the same aliens who had once feared them. The galaxy hadn't just survived humanity's revenge, it had been reborn by it. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, Colonel Walker's invisible ships continued their patrol. They would make sure that no species would ever again try to cage another. This was humanity's true revenge, not through destruction but through transformation. Not dominance but evolution. The stars belonged to everyone now.